The wind howled through the skeletal remains of Chicago, pushing dust and decay through the empty streets. The world had been dying for a long time, long before the undead had stripped it down to its bones. The city, once alive with movement, now lay in eerie silence. No honking cars, no distant sirens. Just the occasional shuffle of something that should have been dead. Ethan Cole adjusted the strap on his backpack, eyes scanning the rooftops. He had learned the hard way that the dead weren't the only things that hunted in these ruins. His group, if you could still call it that, moved in a tight formation behind him. Mia, quick on her feet, kept to his right, her machete ready. Jonah, ex-military, covered their rear with an old shotgun, and Sam, the youngest of them, hugged the shadows, cradling a scavenged revolver as if it could save him from the horrors of this world. 2 blocks ahead, Mia whispered, nodding toward the shattered remains of a grocery store. It was a risk. But then again, every day was. Ethan motioned them forward, keeping low as they moved. They had to be quick, before the sun dipped below the skyline and the real nightmare began. Inside, the stench of rot mixed with stale air. Shelves were overturned, and dried blood coated the linoleum. The place had been picked clean, but that never stopped them from looking. Jonah moved toward the back, checking for anything worth taking. Mia rifled through what was left behind the counter. Sam hesitated, his breath shallow. "You okay?" Ethan asked. Sam nodded, but his hands trembled. They all knew what fear felt like, but for Sam, it never went away. He wasn't like them, hardened by loss, numb to what the world had become. He still had hope, and that made him vulnerable. A noise shattered the quiet, a scraping sound from deeper in the store. Jonah froze, hand on his shotgun. Mia's grip tightened on her machete. Ethan raised a fist, signaling them to hold position. Another sound. Shuffling. A wet, gurgling breath. Not human. Ethan motioned to Mia. She nodded and crept forward. The others stayed back. The thing stepped into view. It had once been a man, but time and hunger had stolen its humanity. Its face was torn, its jaw slack, and its eyes, milky and unfocused, still somehow locked onto them. It wore the remnants of a store uniform, a rusted name tag reading, Carl. Mia didn't hesitate. She surged forward, blade flashing in the dim light. The machete buried itself in Carl's skull with a sickening crunch. The body dropped, twitching for only a second before going still. Jonah exhaled, lowering his gun. Sam looked away. "Let's move," Ethan muttered. They turned to leave, but a sound stopped them cold. A voice. Faint, crackling. Ethan turned his head toward the register. The old radio behind the counter was still on. That was impossible. The power had been gone for months. Then the voice came through again, weak but clear. "If anyone is out there, please, we have food, shelter, safety, follow the river north. We." Static swallowed the words. Jonah's eyes widened. That's a real transmission. Mia's expression hardened. Could be a trap. Ethan's mind raced. No one had heard a working broadcast in months. If this was real, if there was actually a place where people were still alive, it changed everything. The silence of the city pressed in around them. Outside, the sky darkened. The dead would be moving soon. Ethan looked at the others. "We can't stay here. Are we going?" Sam's voice was barely a whisper. Mia glanced at Ethan, waiting. Jonah clenched his jaw. Ethan took a deep breath. "We go." As they stepped outside, the wind carried a sound that made their blood run cold. A moan. Then another. The dead had heard them. And they were coming. The first moan was distant, barely more than a whisper carried on the wind. The second was closer. Ethan's stomach tightened. "Move," he ordered, already stepping into the street. Mia was right beside him, machete gripped tight, eyes darting between the buildings. Jonah took the rear, shotgun in hand, while Sam hesitated for a second too long before falling into step. The sun was sinking fast, casting the ruins of Chicago into long, jagged shadows. Night belonged to the dead. The sooner they were gone, the better. Jonah cursed under his breath. "We stay out here too long, we're screwed." No one argued. The city came alive at night, but not with the living. Ethan led them toward the alleyways, hoping to avoid the worst of it. The undead were slower during the day, but when darkness fell, it was as if something inside them woke up. They became faster, hungrier, smarter. A moan echoed off the concrete, and then another. The dead were gathering. Mia pointed toward an overturned delivery truck ahead. "Shortcut through there." Ethan didn't hesitate. He scrambled up the wreckage, gripping the rusted edges for balance. He reached down to help Sam up while Jonah and Mia climbed on their own. From their vantage point, the street behind them was a nightmare, dozens of figures shuffling forward, their movements sluggish but determined. Hollow, sunken eyes locked onto them, mouths hanging open, blackened tongues twitching in anticipation. Then something changed. One of them stopped. Its head tilted, as if listening. The others did the same. Ethan's blood ran cold. "Go," he ordered, practically dragging Sam down the other side. Mia landed first, already moving. Jonah hit the pavement last, shaking his head. "They're watching us." "We keep moving," Ethan said. "We find shelter. Then we figure out if that radio signal is real." They ran. The streets narrowed, buildings pressing in on both sides. The air was thick with rot and dust, and every broken window felt like an open eye watching them. Mia took point, weaving through the debris. They ducked through a shattered storefront, some kind of abandoned cafe. Tables were overturned, dried blood smeared the walls, but there were no bodies. That was somehow worse. Ethan locked the door behind them, breathing hard. "We rest here for an hour. Then we move." Sam collapsed onto a chair, wiping sweat from his face. He looked worse than before, too pale, his breathing too fast. Jonah frowned. "You good, kid?" Sam nodded, but Ethan wasn't convinced. Mia peered through a gap in the boarded-up window. "They're still out there." Ethan ran a hand through his hair. "They're changing." Jonah exhaled. "Yeah. And that means we're running out of time." Outside, the last rays of sunlight faded. And the city began to wake. The first sound came from above, a rustling against the cracked ceiling tiles, something shifting in the shadows. Ethan's hand went to his knife as he motioned for the others to stay quiet. Outside, the moans had faded into the distance, but that didn't mean they were safe. The dead had a way of appearing when you least expected them. Mia peered through a crack in the boarded-up window. "They're still moving, but they're not scattering like they used to." Ethan exchanged a glance with Jonah. It was another sign. The undead weren't mindless anymore. They were waiting. Watching. Sam let out a low groan, his head resting against the wall. Sweat glistened on his brow. Jonah knelt beside him. "Kid, you sure you're not?" "I'm fine," Sam cut in, though his voice was weak. Ethan didn't like it. They couldn't afford anyone slowing down, and if Sam was getting sick. No. He pushed the thought away. They had bigger problems. Like the thing crawling through the ceiling. The noise came again, something scraping against the beams above them. Then silence. Mia's grip tightened on her machete. "Not a rat, is it?" Jonah shook his head. "Too big." Ethan moved first, stepping carefully toward the back of the cafe. A narrow hallway led to the kitchen, the door hanging half off its hinges. The air smelled worse here, rancid meat and something else, something foul. Then he saw it. A corpse dangled from the ceiling, half its body wedged between the beams, its torso torn open like something had tried to crawl out from the inside. Its arms twitched, fingers curling against the tile. It wasn't fully dead. Not yet. Ethan took out his knife and drove it deep into the thing's skull. A shudder, then stillness. Mia appeared beside him, wrinkling her nose. "That's new." Jonah cursed. "Something's wrong with them." Ethan looked down at the corpse. It wasn't like the others. Its flesh was bloated, pulsing, as if something had been growing inside of it. Whatever this infection was, it was evolving. A sudden bang at the front of the cafe made them all freeze. Then another. A heavy weight slammed against the door. Mia whispered, "They found us." The door rattled. The wood splintered. The moans returned, rising in pitch. Jonah grabbed Sam, pulling him to his feet. "We gotta go. Now." Ethan led them through the back, shoving past broken shelves into a narrow alley. The moment they stepped outside, they heard it, movement on the rooftops. Then a low growl. Not human. Not even undead. Mia turned just in time to see it, a shape leaping from above, something fast and wrong, its body twisted, its limbs too long. It landed on all fours, its head snapping up to reveal milky eyes and a mouth full of jagged teeth. Sam let out a choked cry. "What the hell is that?" The creature moved. Jonah fired. The shotgun blast echoed through the alley, tearing into the thing's shoulder. It barely flinched. Then it was on them. Ethan barely had time to raise his knife before it slammed into him, claws raking across his chest. Pain exploded through him. Mia swung her machete. The blade met flesh, slicing deep into its side. The creature screeched, a high-pitched, inhuman sound, before twisting away and vanishing into the dark. Jonah yanked Ethan to his feet. "You okay?" Ethan touched his chest. "Blood. Not deep enough to kill him, but it hurt like hell. We need to move." The moans were getting louder. The city was waking up. And there was no place left to run. The alley reeked of blood, gunpowder, and decay. Ethan gritted his teeth against the pain in his chest, the wound from the creature still fresh. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't a normal zombie. It had moved with intent, like a predator. And it wasn't alone. "We keep going," Ethan said, wincing as he pressed a hand to his side. Jonah nodded, already leading Sam forward. The kid looked worse with every step, his breathing ragged, skin too pale. Mia wiped her machete clean on her sleeve. That thing could still be out there. Ethan glanced at the rooftops. The creature had vanished into the dark, but the feeling of being hunted hadn't. Then the moans came. Dozens of them. Shambling figures poured into the alley from both sides. The ones in front were the usual kind, rotting, mindless, moving only because of some lingering hunger. But the ones behind them? They were faster. Ethan's stomach twisted. The infection was changing them. Jonah raised his shotgun. "We're boxed in." Ethan's mind raced. The street was ahead, but the dead were closing in fast. If they got caught between them, they were finished. Then he spotted it, a sewer grate beneath their feet, rusted but still intact. It was a gamble, but better than being torn apart. "Mia, help me." Together, they pried it open just as the first of the undead lunged. Mia swung, her machete severing a grasping arm. Jonah fired his shotgun, the blast ripping through two of them. "Go!" Ethan barked. Sam went first, dropping into the darkness below. Jonah followed, then Mia. Ethan was last. As he climbed down, one of the faster ones leapt. Not stumbled. Leapt. Its claws swiped at his back, missing by inches as he let go. He hit the ground hard, the sewer damp and cold beneath him. Above, the grate slammed back into place. Jonah exhaled. That was too close. Ethan nodded, his heart still pounding. We're not safe yet. The tunnel stretched into the dark, water dripping from the ceiling. The walls were slick with grime, but there was no smell of rot. That was good. It meant the dead hadn't made it down here. Yet. Sam coughed, sinking to the ground. I can't. I just need a minute. Mia knelt beside him, pressing a hand to his forehead. Her expression darkened. He's burning up. Jonah stiffened. What kind of sick? Mia didn't answer. She didn't have to. Ethan clenched his fists. Sam had been slowing down since this morning, his energy fading. He hadn't been bitten, but that didn't mean he was safe. The infection wasn't just spread through bites anymore. Jonah sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. Damn it. Ethan crouched beside Sam. That radio signal we heard? It said they had medicine. Mia frowned. If it's real. Ethan looked at the kid, his face twisted in pain. If they did nothing, he was as good as dead. It's our only shot. Jonah nodded. Then we better start moving. The tunnels stretched ahead, endless and dark. Behind them, above them, the dead were waiting. And they were still hungry. The sewer tunnel stretched endlessly ahead, the darkness thick and absolute. The only sounds were the distant drip of water and Sam's ragged breathing. Ethan kept a firm grip on his knife, every nerve on edge. We keep moving, he said, his voice low. Jonah took point, shotgun ready, while Mia stayed close to Sam, half supporting his weight. The kid's fever was getting worse. His skin was clammy, his breaths shallow. How much further? Mia whispered. Ethan checked his map, the old, wrinkled scrap of paper they'd taken off a dead scavenger days ago. If the radio signal was real, the survivors were broadcasting from a small outpost west of the city, somewhere in what used to be the suburbs. That meant they had a long way to go. Jonah exhaled sharply. Assuming this tunnel even gets us out. A deep growl cut through the darkness. Everyone froze. It hadn't come from behind them. It had come from ahead. Mia swallowed. Tell me that was your stomach. Ethan shook his head. The air had changed. It was thicker, carrying a scent that made his gut twist, something sour, something wrong. Then came the sound of skittering. Not slow footsteps. Fast. Clawed. Crawling. Jonah stepped back, pumping his shotgun. Oh, hell no. The darkness ahead of them shifted, the shape almost impossible to see, but the eyes weren't. Milky and wide, reflecting the dim light like an animal's. Then it charged. Ethan barely had time to shove Sam aside before the thing crashed into him. Not a normal zombie. It moved like a spider, long limbs snapping forward, claws scraping against the tunnel walls as it tried to pin him down. Mia slashed with her machete. The blade tore into the creature's arm, but it barely reacted. Jonah fired. The shotgun blast sent it reeling, screeching as black ichor sprayed across the tunnel walls. Ethan scrambled to his feet. Move! They ran. The tunnel twisted and narrowed, the air growing thick with rot. The sounds of pursuit echoed behind them, not just one creature now. More. Mia dragged Sam forward. The kid's fevered eyes flickered open. Ethan, he rasped. Not now, kid, Ethan gritted out, breath burning. Then, suddenly, the tunnel ended. A metal grate blocked the way, rusted but solid. Jonah rattled it. Damn it, it's locked. The creatures were getting closer. The tunnel behind them was too dark to see, but the sound was deafening: claws against concrete, guttural snarls, and the wet, hungry panting of something that had learned to hunt. Ethan pulled out his knife, wedging it into the lock. "Buy me time." Jonah fired again. The tunnel lit up for half a second, revealing the horrors closing in. Malformed. Wrong. No longer human. Mia slashed wildly as one leapt forward, its jaws snapping inches from her face. She kicked it back. "Hurry, Ethan." The lock broke. Ethan threw the grate open. "Go." They scrambled through, Jonah hauling Sam up as Mia kicked the gate shut behind them. Ethan barely had time to lock it before the first creature slammed into the bars. Its face was almost human, twisted and stretched, its mouth too wide, filled with jagged teeth. Its fingers wrapped around the bars, muscles straining, nearly bending the metal. Then it did something that made Ethan's blood run cold. It laughed. Not a growl. Not a moan. A sick, choking chuckle, as if it understood. Jonah paled. "Nope. Nope. Screw that." Ethan took a shaky breath. The tunnel ahead led upward, toward the streets. They weren't safe yet. And whatever was happening to the infected, it was getting worse. The laughter didn't stop. The creature clung to the bars, its jagged teeth bared in something that was almost a grin. Behind it, more of them gathered, figures shifting in the darkness, their eyes gleaming. They weren't like the slow, shambling corpses from before. These things knew. And that made them more dangerous. Ethan tore his gaze away and turned to the others. "We keep moving." Jonah didn't argue. He hefted Sam over his shoulder, the kid barely conscious now, and started up the narrow tunnel. Mia followed, her grip white-knuckled on her machete. Ethan went last, keeping his knife ready. The creatures didn't try to break through the gate. They just watched. And waited. Something about that was worse than if they'd attacked. The tunnel sloped upward, the air getting warmer. The stink of rot faded slightly, replaced by something else, something Ethan hadn't smelled in a long time. Fresh air. Mia spotted it first. Exit. A metal ladder led up to a rusted hatch. Jonah wasted no time, climbing one-handed with Sam draped over his shoulder. Ethan risked a glance back. The tunnel was empty. But he could still feel them. Watching. Remembering. He climbed. Jonah shoved the hatch open, emerging onto cracked pavement. Ethan hauled himself up after Mia and slammed the hatch shut behind them. They were back in the city, but it was different. Chicago had been a corpse for years, but now, something had changed. The streets weren't just empty, they were abandoned. Cars that had once been jammed in endless gridlock were suddenly cleared, as if someone had moved them. A fire smoldered in the distance, but there were no signs of life. No survivors. No dead. Mia gripped Ethan's arm. "Where the hell are they?" Jonah laid Sam down gently. The kid's breathing was getting worse. "We don't have time for this." "That signal, where's it coming from?" Ethan checked the radio, twisting the dial. The static buzzed, but beneath it, a voice crackled through. "You can hear this, keep moving. Do not stop. They're learning. They're changing. We're at the..." The signal cut out. Ethan clenched his jaw. "They're close." Jonah adjusted his shotgun. "Then let's get moving." Mia crouched beside Sam, pressing a hand to his forehead. "We need that medicine. Fast." Ethan scanned the horizon. The city was quiet. Too quiet. Then, in the distance, a sound echoed through the empty streets. A bell. Ringing. Slow. Deliberate. Mia swallowed. That's not a good sign. Jonah nodded grimly. Nope. Ethan tightened his grip on his knife. The dead weren't just changing. They were organizing. And if that was true, humanity didn't have much time left. The bell tolled again, its deep, haunting chime echoing across the dead city. Ethan felt it in his bones, a warning, a signal. Jonah adjusted his grip on the shotgun. That ain't normal. Mia's gaze swept the empty streets. Someone's ringing it. Could be survivors. Ethan wasn't so sure. The streets were cleared for a reason. The dead weren't here, not yet, but the city felt wrong, like something unseen was waiting beneath the surface. A low groan from Sam snapped him back to reality. The kid was getting worse. His fevered eyes flickered open. We gotta go. We know, kid, Jonah muttered. Ethan scanned the skyline. The broadcast came from the suburbs. If we find a car, we can make it there faster. Mia nodded. Then let's move before whatever rang that bell finds us. They kept low, weaving between rusted-out cars and collapsed buildings. The deeper they went, the stranger it became. There were signs of life, fresh footprints, barricades that had been torn apart recently, but no people. Then they found the first body. A man, slumped against a bus, his eyes wide open in horror. His throat was untouched, no bite marks. But his chest. Mia inhaled sharply. What the hell did that? His ribs had been shattered outward, as if something had burst from inside. Jonah took a step back. Oh, hell no. Ethan knelt beside the corpse, heart pounding. It wasn't just one body. As they moved forward, they found more. Dozens. All of them killed the same way. And then he saw the writing. Scrawled across a nearby wall in dark, smeared letters. We hear them in our heads. A chill ran through Ethan. We need to go. Now. Mia's voice was tight. What does that mean? We hear them in our heads? Jonah shook his head. I don't want to find out. The bell tolled again. Closer this time. Then came the whispers. Ethan froze. Soft. Faint. Like voices carried on the wind. But there was no wind. Sam stirred, eyes barely open. His lips moved, voice hoarse. They know we're here. Then the moans started. Not distant. Close. A shadow shifted at the far end of the street. Then another. And another. Figures emerged from the alleys, moving in eerie silence, their heads tilted as if listening. Then, as one, they charged. Not shambling. Running. Mia grabbed Sam. We have to go. Ethan spotted an old police cruiser, doors open. He bolted for it, wrenching the door wide. Keys still inside. Jonah tossed Sam into the back seat. Mia jumped in next. Ethan barely had time to slam the door shut before the first infected slammed against the car, its face too human, its lips moving like it was trying to speak. He turned the key. The engine roared to life. He hit the gas. The car tore down the street, bodies slamming against the sides, clawing, screeching. Jonah twisted in his seat. They're not like the others. They're. Sam's voice came from the back. Weak. Barely a whisper. They remember. Ethan's grip tightened on the wheel. They weren't running from mindless corpses anymore. They were running from something much, much worse. The tires screeched against the cracked pavement as Ethan pushed the cruiser to its limit. The infected weren't falling behind. They were keeping pace. Jonah checked the shotgun. They don't stop, man. They don't get tired. Mia cradled Sam in the back seat. His fever was worse. His breathing came in shallow, uneven gasps. They were running out of time. The highway stretched ahead, leading out of the city. The suburbs weren't far. If the broadcast was real, if there were still survivors, that was their only chance. But something gnawed at Ethan's gut. The streets weren't abandoned anymore. Shapes lined the roads. Waiting. Not moving. Not moaning. Just standing. Hundreds of them. Lifeless eyes followed the car as it sped past, their heads twitching, their lips muttering. Ethan couldn't hear the words, but he felt them crawling inside his skull, like an itch just beneath his skin. Sam stirred. No. Mia gripped his hand. Stay with me, kid. Then the radio crackled. Ethan's heart skipped. The broadcast? The static cleared for a moment, and a voice, calm, human, spoke. If you're still alive, keep going. The dead are not what they were. They are something else now. We are their past, and they are our future. But you must hurry. The final dawn is coming. Then, silence. Jonah's knuckles went white on the shotgun. I don't like the sound of that. Neither did Ethan. But they didn't have a choice. The suburbs loomed ahead. Houses overgrown, abandoned. A thick mist rolled over the streets, swirling around the dead standing in perfect lines along the sidewalks. And then, the bell. Louder. Clearer. Everywhere. Sam's eyes snapped open. For the first time in hours, he wasn't feverish. He looked at Ethan. Then Mia. Then Jonah. They're not chasing us, Sam whispered. They're guiding us. Mia recoiled. Sam, what are you talking about? The boy blinked, and for a brief second, his pupils weren't human. Jonah raised the shotgun. Oh, hell no. Sam smiled. The street ahead was blocked. A mass of dead, shoulder to shoulder, waiting. Watching. Ethan's hands clenched the wheel. There was no way forward. No more tomorrows. Only the end. Only the beginning. The final chapter ends here.